proposed capital outlay budgets. This will be, of course, a workshop. You can look at the agenda on your computer. 2.1 will be the proposed capital outlay budgets for fiscal year 2019-2020. And so at this juncture, I see that Mrs. Scallon has sat by the podium there along with Mr. Horton. And Superintendent Chambers, I'll turn it over to you so you can, in my imagination, turn it over to your folks.
Absolutely. So I will say, as you know, a lot of time and energy once again has gone into creating a capital budget, and Mr. Horton and Ms. Scallon done a great job of putting it all together. So I think it'd be appropriate to turn it over to Ms. Scallon.
All right. Welcome, Ms. Scallon.
Welcome. Good morning. I thought what we might do is you all received a capital outlay email with the documents attached, and then also you received a hard copy. So I thought what we might do is to start off is to walk through the booklet and just let me give you some information on what's included in the booklet, and then we'll come back and talk to and about the germane revenue and projects that are being proposed for 1920. Okay, so you have your yellow booklet, capital outlay budget and 5-year work plan, and as you know, a requirement from the state is that we will develop and fund a 5-year capital outlay work plan. And so when we talk about developing and funding that plan, of course, the constraint is the money that we receive. So this certainly is not all-inclusive, and in fact, it is just a minuscule portion of what the district needs and would hope to have to address the most critical needs at this point, not all of the needs that are necessary. Okay, so if you flip, if you just open to the first page, that gives you your table of contents, and it tells you what is contained in this booklet and what page it's contained. So let's look at section 1, and that is the summary of proposed capital outlay budget. And basically, it is this landscape sheet, and what this sheet reflects the revenue that is estimated for the current year, and then the revenue that is estimated at this point based on the information that we have for the next 4 years, which then makes your total for 5 years, okay? And so I'm going to go ahead and talk about, let me go ahead and go through the booklet and then we'll come back. Okay, so your next section, section 2, is your proposed 5-year capital outlay plan. And if you flip to that section, which starts with page 2, it's 11 by 17 landscape sheets. And it basically, the first section is your proposed projects from your new revenue for 1920, okay? And then the next section that starts with line 47 that says proposed projects from carryover funds, everything below that heading are projects that have already been school board approved from revenue from last year or previous years. And sometimes you will see projects on here that if you just look at that project, you think, well, we have $500,000 in that project. Well, we don't. That money's encumbered. That work is in progress, but it has not been expended, so it still reflects as money that is budgeted, which it is. Okay. Okay, so let's flip to section 3, which begins on page 4. And as you can see, again, it's 11 by 17 page, and then you will notice how small that page is and how the information on that page, and that is based on the new revenue that we will have for 1920 and what the projects are that are proposed to be funded from those revenues. Okay, and then we're going to come back and talk about that. Okay, so section 4 is entitled Source of Funding Matrix. And again, this is your already school board approved projects that are in progress in some shape or at some stage, okay? Now, this also, this section also shows you your funding sources for each one of those projects. So you could look at it and you could see, you'll see the first funding column says PICO maintenance. So if you ran down that column, that would show you what we're funding out of PICO maintenance, which are previous dollars, or CO and DS, or 2 mil funds. Okay? And then section 5, which starts on page 7. This is just a little cheat sheet matrix that I've developed for y'all for information. So this is just a bird's eye view. You can look at a funding source and then you can kind of run down and it'll tell you what you can fund, what types of projects you can fund out of that source of money. Are there any requirements as far as being survey recommended, or has to be on the project priority list, or is it resolution limited? So it kind of tells you the statutory requirements in addition to the permissible uses of those funds, okay? And so, as you will see on that matrix out in the far right-hand column, I've added one which is safety and security of school buildings, so that's the grant money. So that again would just tell you what you can use that money for and what you cannot. Okay, and then section 6, capital project funds definitions. You know, this you have each year, and it just kind of gives you a definition of what the fund is and what the source of the fund is, and then each year I modify that just to match whatever sources of revenues we have, or whichever ones have gone away. Like, you know, one time we had for many years the SID awards and the Classrooms First Award, so that goes away, and this year you'll see the school safety was added. Okay, so that just in summary is what's in your booklet. Okay. So now let's go back to page 1. Okay, so if you look under the column that says projected fiscal year 1920, you will see that the first source of revenue that we have that we have listed on there is capital outlay and debt service, CO and DS. You will note that the same amount is reflected in each year. The reason that is because as of right now, the only information I have on exactly what the amount will be is based on last year's information. So we're still waiting for them to give us that information. I suspect it won't change. You know, any difference will be minimal. This source of money comes from license plates. So the tags that are sold, there's a portion of that money that goes to school districts, goes to colleges, and part of the formula for that funding is, unlike typically it's FTE or capital outlay FTE, this is based on instructional units. So they actually look at instructional units, and you get X number of dollars. I don't remember now I think it's like $600. And then each year it looks at growth, and so additional growth in instructional units gives you $800, or that's what it was last year. So anyway, that's just a little tidbit of where that money comes from. Okay, so so if we move down, then we see PICO, Public Education Capital Outlay, New Construction, and we are projected to not get any funding this year, and we didn't last year. And then PICO maintenance money, we are projected right now, as I understand, and this is not official information, but that's published, but that we will not receive maintenance money. Because like this year, 18-19, we received in the neighborhood of about $650,000 for PICO maintenance money. We will not receive that in 19-20. However, in lieu of that, we will receive just about the same amount for school safety. Okay, the school safety grant. So basically, the $650,000 or so that we would have gotten for PICO maintenance, that goes away and it comes back in the form of school safety money. Okay? All right, so then let's move down to, you see where it says estimated local, and under that is your district local capital improvement tax. That basic is your 2 mil money, which really now is your 1.5 mil money. And that is, as you can see, that is your primary source of revenue for all of your capital projects. And so the CONDS was about $907,000. Your 2 mil is about $28.8 million. So that gives you a total estimated new revenue of approximately $29.7 million for the district. Okay? So then if you move down a little bit further, you'll see beginning fund balance. Now, beginning fund balance is basically your revenue that is unexpended from your prior years. Doesn't mean that it's uncommitted, doesn't mean that it's not already encumbered or work in progress, okay? It's just not expended, okay? So, as you can see, your fund balance unappropriated, $986,000 roughly. Your reserve for encumbrances are $2.3 million, and then your reserve for project carryovers, which are projects that are in progress, is about $12.9 million. So your carryover money currently is $16.1 million. You have new revenue of $29.7 million, which gives you a total for the for 1920 of $45.9 million.
But in a way, that's misleading because
is.
of what you said. And I used to have this discussion with some former superintendents when they would see money in my budget, because that money is actually encumbered. I mean,
That's right.
yes, it's sitting there, everyone can see it. It looks like it's a surplus, but that's not true because those dollars are already encumbered.
That's correct. That's correct. They're encumbered, or they are planned for a project
right.
that is.
It's forthcoming.
That's right. Excuse me. So really, in actuality, what you have to work with is your $29.7 million
Right.
new revenue
New
to
money.
achieve all that you can with those funds. And so just to talk to you about the other 4 years, so then for the next 4 years, we project out what we believe we may get in terms of revenue. So, like for PICO new construction, PICO maintenance, you are dependent on getting that information from the state, and we haven't gotten it yet. We should get it soon. So right now, I'm just having to use the information from last year and move it out a year. Okay, but really, for our purposes, even though we're planning for the next 4 years, what you're looking at is the current year, 1920. That's what's of interest to you, because the other years can change, as you know, in terms of revenue or projects.
Ms. Callen, real quick on the projected, the first one, the 2021, the PICO dollars there. Now, is that pretty much a guarantee we'll get somewhere in that neighborhood, or could it be
No.
zero again?
No, it could be zero,
Okay.
because I do not have anything official from the state.
Right.
So I'm using what I have official from the state for 18-19, because that is official and that was a projection, and they
Right.
do project it out 5 years. Now, I would suspect that I would suspect that we may experience the same thing that we're going to experience this year. PICO new construction, even though they projected it in 18-19, for out years, we did not get anything in 18-19. I'm being told we're not going to get anything in 1920, so I would suspect that once I get the official estimates from the state for this year, that we probably will have a projection of 0 in PICO new construction. Now, PICO maintenance, we did not get anything, or they're telling me that we're not going to get anything for 1920, that instead we're going to get the safety money. So I would suspect that may occur for the next year too. So I guess to answer your question, Mr. Bryant, those two amounts for PICO are not reliable because until I get some definitive information from the state about their revenue projections, then it's not definitive. But instead of we as a district making up our own whatever we think, it's safer to go with documented estimates from the state, even though I may think they may change when I get the new ones.
And following up on that, that's an important point for the public, that those safety dollars amount to a shift in funding. Is that correct?
Well, what I would say
Okay.
is, if you were a layperson looking at that, that's what I would surmise.
All right.
Right.
And so basically, it's not new money, it's a shift in funding from another source, leaving that funding source depleted.
Correct. It's basically redirecting us to use that money for a alternate purpose.
For a categorical that can only be spent
That's correct.
in that particular manner,
That's correct. And
taking
pe-
away discretion that we
Well,
would have had.
Yes, sir, in some respect, but in PICO maintenance,
Right,
remember, you can only use that
I
for certain
understand.
things too.
Right.
But yes, you're right that it's being shifted, and now we can't use it for PICO maintenance.
Right.
We have to use it for safety.
That, right.
And I appreciate you saying that, because that's what I wanted the public to hear, is that it's a shift, so.
It's not new money or additional money at all,
Right.
which is pretty disappointing,
That's right.
but typical.
Yeah, oh, yeah. All right, I'm sorry to interrupt.
No, that's okay, no.
Thank you.
Okay, so with that being said, let's look at section 2. And I think what may be easier is,
A lot of columns here.
yes,
Ms. Galvin.
sir. What may be easier, because the second section just has the new revenue and the
Okay.
carryover revenue. Let's go to section 3.
All right. Section 3.
And this isolates your new revenue.
Okay. New revenue. Okay, that's page 4, is what I'm showing.
Yes, sir.
Yes.
Okay. And so I'm just going to kind of talk you through information
Sure.
on here, and then, of course, then Mr. Horton will be able to help you specifically with specific projects or any
Okay.
questions
Okay.
dealing with those. Okay, so overall, we have the $29.7 million of new revenue, and as you can see, and we've already talked about, CO&DS comprises $907,000. The other $28.8 million is out of 2 mil. However, let's talk about first we have to look at previously committed commitments, either in terms of debt or either in terms of contracts. So when you look at that, let's look at let's start with line 29.
All right. And this is a good one for the public, because the question will be is, why in the world does the school board have debt? So go ahead.
Okay. So, of this amount, out of the 29.7 million, and I'm just going to do round numbers, 6 million has to come off the top for debt service. Why do we have debt? We have debt because in this example basically is the debt that we owe for when we built the two new schools, which are now old schools, but Shoal River and Riverside. And then at that time, there was some, and then there's some previous COPs in there, but it is money that we have borrowed to build something significant, like two schools, and at that time, it was $70 million. We borrowed for those two, to build those two
Right.
schools and equip them.
Right.
And then there are times, there's other COPs where we've borrowed money to add wings or, to do something major. So that is,
Because we didn't have those funds in hand.
yes, sir.
And this was a mechanism provided by state law that we could borrow this money with the condition that we, of course, we pay it back, and we were allowed to use these dollars, these maintenance dollars, if you will, to pay it back in that fashion. And it takes a period of time to pay back $70 million. The consequence of that, though, means that those dollars aren't available to us to use in other ways.
That's
I mean,
right.
it's committed, it's debt. I mean, and they want their money back.
That's right, it's dead. It is just like, it's just like your personal residence. You decide
Right.
to add a second story, or you decide to
New home.
add on to it because you have a need to do that. You don't have the cash to just pay cash for it, which we don't, so you borrow and then you commit to a repayment plan.
Bright side is I noticed over on the other page that in about 3 years, that debt is paid. Is that correct, Rita? When does that pay off?
That was going to be my
3
question.
years.
That's what I was
Yeah,
gonna say.
so.
3 more years.
3 more
I mean,
years, yes, sir.
That's better than 20
And-
years.
Oh, yeah.
that
Yes.
started
That's
out.
when- back
So
when
at
it
that
started.
point, we will have a little more.
That's right.
money.
And conversely to that, can you imagine what that community would be like without those two new schools?
No choice.
It would be unmanageable.
Well,
So-
From South Side to Riverside, it made a
Mhm.
big difference.
Exactly.
And
Absolutely. And like,
Richburg to Shoal River.
And Davidson before that.
No school.
And like Mr. Destin just mentioned, the COPs are usually for 20 years. The last one we did for 15, but it is a long-term commitment. Okay, so then let's look at line 30. Line 30 is your seat management lease. And so that is the lease agreement that we have to provide computers to classroom students, teachers, and we only pay for the instructional and the school part out of capital outlay. And so that is to provide the technical services, to provide your help desk, your support, your refresh, and to keep things very current. Now, some people might say to you, you could just buy the computers, but I think we probably all know, if you buy the computers, what happens is that just like vehicles, just like us with vehicles, we have courier vans that are antiquated and are patched, and that's what happens with your technology and your computer when you're trying to pay cash as you go. You cannot stay up to date and current like you would want to in the instructional environment in order to provide those students the best resources and be competitive with other school districts. And then the other piece of it is that if you have the computers yourself, then you also are going to have a whole staff of technicians that go out and address the problems and the issues.
As we did at one time.
Yes, ma'am.
And the
Yes,
minute
ma'am.
we bought that technology, it was old. The minute we got it set up, it was old.
Always will be.
Yeah, from the refresh period, Rita, what is it, 3 years? Yeah. Well, school board, a number of years ago, made the calculation that 6.5 a year, which is almost equivalent to the debt, was still a good deal. And I've seen nothing to change my mind about that.
Particularly when you throw in the support piece.
That's exactly
The
right.
fact that they're responsible for managing and correcting and fixing, and then we haven't even added all the security issues associated with viruses and et cetera. So, and just trying to keep your own staff up to speed on that, I can only imagine what the cost of that would have been.
And it's hard for a school district to pay
Exactly.
instructional technologists the pay that they can get out in the real world, in the industry. They get paid a ton of money to do what we couldn't do in-house.
What does that come out to a school, about 150,000? What do we have, 40 schools? So that's really not bad. You know,
With a new computer every 3 years.
That's right.
Plus the
And the people that take care of them.
district offices, you know, beyond that, it's
Right.
not just the classroom, right?
Right.
It's all the different. And it seems like we're always adding to that technology piece, different things and more computers, more things going on that.
Well, I can only throw in an anecdotal piece, is that whenever I had a problem with computers and I called these folks, it got fixed, and it got fixed quick,
Yep.
okay? And that was important, particularly with the amount of testing that we do now on these computers. It's huge, okay? All right, Ms. Gallo.
Okay. Okay, so that's about 6.5 million. So now we're at 12.5 million that's committed off of the 29 million.
Goes fast.
It goes fast, yes, sir. And then let's look at line 31. And you see that that says transfer to the general fund, maintenance expenditures. And what that relates to is many years ago, the statute was written to where school districts could use some portion of capital outlay funding to help offset the maintenance operation of the school district. I would venture to say that most every single district does that. That was a source of funds and has continued for years, and you cannot stop that without wiping out your entire maintenance department. And so while it doesn't cover all of the cost of the maintenance operations, it does contribute a significant portion and the majority of that cost. So that is 5.5 million. So now you're at what? 18 million? So now you're at 18 million. So that means then you are left with approximately $11.7 million. Okay? And so with that $11.7 million, then that's what we use to try to address the most critical needs that we have. And so it's if you want, we can walk through each project, or if you have projects that you have questions about. So it's really up to y'all how we address them, and that's where I'm going to now tag team here with Mr. Horton on any discussion on the
I
actual
understand.
projects.
All right, colleagues, any questions or thoughts?
I would just say that the majority of what I see on here is just due to the fact that our schools are getting older and we're having to fix them, the best we can.
Well, and I appreciate the detail that's in this information, because it really leaves little room for questioning
Yeah.
or wondering where it's going. It's so detailed. I really appreciate that. And likewise, as a former school principal, Dr. White, you can probably concur how helpful it is that the band instrument replacement dollars are remaining there. So
Yes.
I appreciate
That's
that for the
50,000
schools.
across the district.
Right,
though.
that's
So,
right.
Right.
But
Yeah.
every little bit, when you're
Exactly.
paying so much for a tuba,
That's right.
you know, I mean, you
Or an
don't
over.
realize how much that goes outside of your school budget.
A couple, I'm sorry, go ahead.
And the band instrument this year is for high schools.
Mhm.
Last year
We
was
rotate.
middle schools, so
Right.
we rotate that.
Right.
Oh, okay, yeah.
And just a comment or two, if I could. So, obviously, you can see of the 11.7 million, we're asking for over half of that in a line item to be for security for schools.
So the doors.
And so I think that's important, that everybody's aware of that. And so what remains of that, we've looked at and deemed to be something that we believe needs to be taken care of this year. Obviously, and it's happened last year, it happens every year, there are things that arise during the course of a year that the superintendent would ask us to come back to the board and ask for an
Sure.
adjustment to this.
Shift.
a large AC goes out somewhere that's not anticipated, or any number of things. And so obviously, even the things that are on this capital project, just for the public to know, they still come back before the board for approval as individual items once they meet that board threshold. So there's not something, this is not a final approval of anything. You'll see these items again individually, up to and including the safety pieces.
And I had a question from a constituent last night about, well, how much maintenance money or how much of these capital outlay funds do you really have discretion over? And I guesstimated after that deduction that Mr. Horton just mentioned for safety, about $5 million. That was pretty close, I guess. Not exactly. It's not an accurate number as far as our CPA is concerned, but it's pretty close. Okay.
Well, and I think we can be proud of the fact that if you look down the items, half of those are security,
Yep.
and there's a good bit on the ADA playgrounds.
Yep.
So we can say that we satisfied safety and
Wow.
nurturing and needs of our ESE students.
Right.
So,
right.
I mean, I feel very proud of that fact.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
I have something
Sure.
I have a question
Sure,
about. Okay.
sure.
As a board member, we each get some money that we can use when schools request. And after doing a little research, I know that this amount has gone down in recent years. And I believe I spoke with Ms. Scallon. You told me that 10 years ago, this amount was doubled that, and it's gone down. Well, my point is, since our overall budget has shrunk, I think board members, at least I know I am, speaking for me, have been contacted more and more by principals to get more done. And as we know, right now we're allocated $75,000 per board member. And that's been, like you said, up to 10, am I correct in that, 10 years ago, that it changed to that lower amount?
Yes, ma'am. At one point, it was 125,000. It was twice the amount.
Yeah.
Or 150.
150.
Yeah, and then like you say, as the budget has been reduced and the needs have gotten greater, that amount was reduced.
Right. So, as we all know, that cost of living, that $75,000 doesn't go as far as it did 10 years ago. And I know this year I had a lot of requests from different things, and it's smaller items, but still they eat towards that $75,000. So could it possibly be that that number could be changed and that the board members could be added a little bit more to, so that we can, I mean, it's not our money. We turn around and use it for back to schools that are, classes. And so I'd like to see that change. I know we can't jump right back to twice that, but if that were to happen, I just want to be prudent and know where that would, I know it has to come from something, you're slicing the pie, but if you could maybe help me with that, or if.
Well, I was just, the only thing I was going to, would input would be process for such a particular request or need. So procedurally, that would be the point I think that we would have to discuss. Certainly, that couldn't be something that we did here because it's a workshop. Is that correct, Mr. Attorney? And in my mind, I'm thinking, would that necessitate a motion to increase that amount of funding? Or thoughts? And I'm throwing it on the floor because I haven't been here. Mr. Destin, I don't know if you were here when we reduced it or how that happened or any of that background in order to
Right.
accommodate the
Right.
request you're making.
No, they did that before I arrived.
Okay.
But it would take a motion, and the only downside is we're very close to public hearing. I mean, we could change it at the public hearing, but then you're adjusting the other down. 5 times the 75 that we get now is about 400, a little less than that.
It's on here.
But it's a substantial amount of the overall money that we have available. But, you know, it's certainly something we could discuss, and we would have to make a motion to change it, but it has a lot of ripple effects. And
All right.
I've always supported what we get, because to get things on the Capitol is a very long and complicated and drawn-out process.
Over a period of years.
That's right. And we're kind of like the backup plan. If something happens immediately that has to be addressed, we can use our capital money for it. But to shift too much over to that gives me pause. So we can certainly talk about it and see what.
Okay, any
what the
other
feeling
thoughts? And I'll just say that I was here when I sat through some of these meetings when there was exactly an opposite
That's right.
request,
Take it all away.
Remember
to
those?
take it all away.
I was in the audience.
And so those discussions were interesting as well.
I think for myself, for instance, you know, I have 11 schools in my zone, and not that I necessarily put all that money toward those schools, because I have helped outside my zone.
Right.
But, you know, for me, you know, the struggle is try to prioritize which is most important. And, you know, whether it's Wright Elementary getting some bongos that only cost a couple $1,000s, you know, for them, that was huge. You know, they weren't playing on buckets anymore. So I was able to use some of my money to do that. But then at Antioch this year, we did carpeting for a whole wing, and I was able to use my money. So you kind of, you know, you learn to be a good steward of that $75,000, let it spread out. As a matter of fact, I had one request, and I think I couldn't do it because I have to wait until the next one. It was only $2,000, so, you know, it's.
But I was able to do that for you.
Oh, well, thank you. Which one was that?
Southside.
Oh, well, thank you. Thank you.
Oh, yeah, it's no doubt we all work together to do that, but again, if the amount has been the same for 10 years, and what has stayed the same for 10 years, price-wise, and again, what I think is so good is, it's those items, you know, we're not putting bongos in the big,
Right.
you know, we can do those things that can make an immediate impact, but the amount, and I don't know, you're saying something about emotion, we're just talking here, but I don't know if it has to be in a motion, the amount that we would want to change that to. Okay, so that might be something that, you know, there's kind of, do we want to change it all, and then how much? But to me, it would be a service that we're giving right back immediately to the schools. And even though we all officially are assigned schools, I know all of us have helped out different schools regardless of the number of schools we are assigned. And just seems to me that like other things, the time has come to look at upping that amount so that we can actually service more schools on some of those items that are not going to ever get on the big picture of capital outlay.
Okay. So in my mind, what I have seen happen at this table before is that there would need to be a motion as to what the amount would be, and then for guidance to the superintendent and his staff where that amount would propose to come from as part of the motion rather, and then the board would be prepared to act should there be a second.
Well, could we hear first, no matter what the amount, where it would come from before?
Well,
That's kind of backwards, I know, but
would you want them to decide where it came from, or
Or-
would you want to? Or if
Okay.
you're going to make the motion, I don't
Okay.
know.
I would need some direction on that.
There's an option to do it either way.
Yeah, I mean.
Yeah, okay.
It's always good to ask Ms. Scanlon if she has an opinion on these type of
Exactly,
matters.
that's what I was getting at. I would like some direction from her on that. Obviously, we know it cuts out from others, but even if it was $50, where would it come from?
Well, the list is right here in front of us.
Okay.
Right.
So we have roof replacement, we have playgrounds, we have chiller, boiler services, we have custodial equipment. I mean, you can see.
And therein lies the problem.
Of course.
Because it's a very, very limited list to begin with.
And it's already been pared down to
Yeah.
get here.
That's right, we've shifted a lot over toward the security.
I just think if we're asking a lot of our district to find ways to save money, and I appreciate the offer that is brought before us, but, making our 75,000 this year stretch as far as we can, and maybe next year looking at it, hopefully, we might have some alternative revenue funds coming in, so.
Well, not only that, in 3 years, that $6 million a year debt goes away.
That's
Boy,
right.
Then you'll
Yes.
have a little money to talk about anyway. Although, is that appropriate to be shifted over to that category? Can it be?
It can, because it's funded from 2 mil,
Yeah,
so
okay.
we free up 6 million in
That's
2
right.
mil, and then, of
Okay.
course, you could use that for anything that's listed on here under that column. But to address Ms. Van Check's question, if the board made a motion and wanted to adjust that allocation in any amount, then you would need to look at the projects on this list and say, which ones would I propose to be reduced? Because it would be all off of this page. That would be the only place that you'd have the money to work with.
That becomes a real villain-looking position, doesn't it?
Yes, it is.
Well, I was feeling like I was going for the good guy, and that kind of turns it the other way.
Well, I know I appreciate you suggesting that, just because it is a good feeling to be able to help, but, in the time that we're in right now, I would just say maybe looking at next year as something we might be able to do, but if we're asking the district to try to figure out how to save as much money as we can to use for different projects, then I think we should just stay within our 75,000 and make it work. Because I know I would like to do some big projects throughout my zone, and I see one's on there for a couple of years, but.
Yeah, we're gonna start looking to see how many you got.
I would need to save 2 years of that, so the 100,000 would be great. I wouldn't have to save.
Let me
So
ask
no
you
more carpet
something
for you.
about the maintenance fund, because, for example, one of the things I get asked to do is replace school signs, for example. School signs. So would that be something like, would that be a maintenance kind of thing, where sometimes they already have a sign, but it's not working anymore, so it has to, would that be something that would be under?
Are you talking about like the electronic signs that?
Yes,
that
ma'am.
the board goes out, or, the
Yeah.
motherboard or whatever
Yes.
they call it?
Yes, ma'am.
If that is, if it's a sign that's already installed and everything, and something goes out, then that would be, maintenance and repairs.
Right, so that, I see maintenance expenditures, and when I'm thinking, some of the things that we're doing, they tend to go along the line, even though we're replacing things, they would be more of a maintenance kind of thing in my mind. I'm just curious about that, if that
Okay.
would be,
And let me just make sure I clarify now, that line 31 that says maintenance expenditures,
okay.
if that's what you're talking about, that is the transfer to the general fund to cover
Oh, I
the
gotcha.
salaries of maintenance employees.
I'm sorry, okay.
And the supplies and stuff for them to do the work that they do.
Okay, I'm sorry, all right, so it's not a maintenance fund, so
No.
to speak.
Yeah.
And
that's what-
I just want to comment, the fact that we're able to do that is a huge help. Because if all of a sudden we couldn't do that, and you had to go find $5 to $6 million in our existing budget, I can't imagine.
At where we're at today, as far as funding and all,
Right.
we have, and you would have to reduce positions.
And that's a key-
And some positions somewhere, and a huge amount of positions, because you do not have $5 million
Idle.
that you can propose in reductions that are not going to impact positions.
Exactly.
Because, again, remember, 80 to 85% at any point in time is made up of positions. And when you're talking that amount of money, and we just don't have it. We do not have it.
And you can do a rough calculation if you just take an average salary of $45,000 and divide it into 5 million, and you'll come pretty close. How many positions? Okay, so I guess procedurally though, what needs to happen is I guess Monday at the workshop for this capital outlay, if there's such a motion, and should it get a second, then we could make that direction. I'm hearing other board members, though, say maybe another time, at a different time of the year, might be better. I don't know how else to answer.
Mr. Chairman, that's the value of a workshop session. It does give board members a chance to discuss with each other in a public setting how they feel about those kind of issues, which then can inform a board member as to whether or not they decide to pursue that in a
Right.
board meeting. Because obviously here, if enough members say, you know, maybe not this year, then that would let a board member kind of get a feel
Yep.
for whether that's going to go or not. So,
Right.
And that's very appropriate in a workshop.
It's a good way to float an idea.
Yes,
Yeah.
sir.
I think I recall too from years past that the inception of the budget, the beginning of the budget is along February, March timeline, so that might be a good juncture when you're starting the tentative budgets.
When we're doing the budget development.
Right.
For the next
first
year.
creations. So just
Okay.
Thank you.
All right. How about any other questions or comments, colleagues, about the information that we've been given so far?
I'll just say one more thing about the maintenance budget. As a school principal, I'm so tickled that that's there, and I will say of the 3 principalships I had, one of the most, even today, nightmarish situations, on a holiday weekend, getting a phone call from a teacher who had gone up to work in her room saying, "Dr. Kelly, you've got to get here. I don't know what's happening, but there is water flooding the hall and my room." I rolled up to the school. It looked like a volcano, and you probably remember, I think you were my board member at the time. It looked like a volcano had exploded under the main sidewalk. Steve, I know you remember. Bill, I know you do. A water main had ruptured for no apparent reason that you could see with a visible eye, and was just shooting up like, a flume of spray, and it had flooded an entire wing. So over a holiday weekend, a phone call, and knowing that you could call people and they would
That's
be
right.
there on a holiday weekend, and they had a fund they could tap into to make the necessary calls and get people out there. I think I still have pictures of that. It was just amazing. I'd never seen anything like it in my life at a school. So these are critically needed funds, and I appreciate the people behind the funds to make it happen.
Agreed. Okay, Ms. Gallen, unless there's something else, we're prepared to move forward.
No, sir, unless you have
Oh,
other
I see.
questions
Okay.
or other comments or anything else you'd like to say. And I'll have to defer to
Mr.
Mr.
Horton.
Horton if there's anything else additionally he'd like to discuss or talk about.
Not at this time. Do you have any questions?
All right.
Do you have any questions?
Well, colleagues, that kind of opens the floor back up again. Anything else before we conclude this workshop?
I'll just say again, your cheat sheet on page 7, I really love that. What the funds are called and what expenditures can be made out of that. That's a great little sheet there. Thank you, Rita.
Excuse me, go ahead.
And I would just like to say, Ms. Gallen, I know I sent you an email the other day just to say thank you to you and your team, and I see Vince is back there. So for us school board members, whenever you get a quote in from a principal, always send it to Vince because he's
Me
probably
too.
going to save you
Yes,
some money.
exactly
That's
right.
right.
Process.
So, and I want to say thanks to Vince because I know he saved me a couple $1,000s last year on different requests from schools and all. So, but y'all did an awesome job as always. So.
And is this already on the web, by the way?
It
Or
is.
will it? Okay, so the members of the public that would like to look at the capital outlay plan, if they go to finance, then they can find, I guess, this document?
It's actually on the agenda item.
Okay, on the
Okay?
agenda item?
And so I always wait until
I see.
that board meeting is concluded before I put
Excellent.
something out.
All right, so it's on the agenda item for the upcoming meeting, they can see it, and then after that, when it's finally approved, it'll be out there when anyone can see it anytime. Okay?
Absolutely.
All right, anything else?
I just
Mr.
have
Dester?
one comment, Chairman. It's pretty slim, and we've shifted as much as we can toward security.
Right.
But I would point out that we still have a long ways to go and a lot of funding to seek. And when you bear that in mind, when we go forward with our half cent, we have some very serious needs. At
All
the
right.
top of that list still is the
Okay.
security of the schools that we're working on, but we have a ways to go.
Okay, all right. And following up on that, Mr. Destin, Mr. Chambers, I don't know if you've had any dialogue with folks, or if we're thinking about trying to ask the voters about a half-cent sales tax. We've had rampant discussions about that here in the past, recent past, in fact. So if there's anything you'd like to share or could share, that would be helpful.
So I would say, as you can imagine, as you go around to different community events, or you're just out in the public or out at the schools, there's probably not an event that I go to where the half-cent sales tax is not brought up. When you look at this budget, about $29 million, and then once you dwindle down to the things that you have to do, and you see there's about a little over $5 million left for an entire district, I think we all realize that we need additional funds to manage a school district of this size. I do think that there's a point in time where we need to look at the half-cent sales tax. I will say internally, we've started having conversations about a half-cent sales tax internally, and want to make sure that at the point in time where we do come to the board and talk to you about whether or not we want to move forward with a half-cent sales tax, that we're organized and well organized in a clear plan, a clear vision. So wouldn't want to come to you without that, obviously. But we have started some internal conversations on that discussion based on the amount of feedback that I've received, and I know a number of you have received, about the need to move forward with the half-cent sales tax. And I think, like many of you have stated, whether in your own mind or out loud, I think if we do move forward, we need to feel pretty confident that there's a good chance. When the last thing that we would want to do is move forward, not in organized fashion, and not get a half-cent sales tax, because then when do you go again?
And I'll just say that the entire year that we campaigned, the three of us, that was number one on the citizens' list of questions for us. Would you support a half-cent sales tax? So it's been out there for quite a while.
And I think also here, you said a key word, and that's the vision. And I think we need to make sure that people understand that no matter what's happened over the last couple of years, this is a vision for 10 years ahead. So there's the possibility of 2 superintendents, 15 different new school board members. So this is an investment. This is something that I think the people of Okaloosa County do understand. Obviously, with the county passing their half-cent sales tax in a really loud voice, in my opinion, based on other times that they've tried to pass a tax, I think the people of Okaloosa County understand that it's time, and that the education piece of it is an investment for the future, and we're going to have to do something eventually. So,
and these revenues can only be used for capital projects. I mean, these are not revenues that we can supplant other funding for. I mean, it's to help remediate, if you will, and renovate these old, aged facilities that we're really having some issues with, as evidenced most recently in the newspaper. Mr. Destin's comments regarding repairing one of those facilities. I guess for me, when you get to that juncture, what I would like to see and hear from would be some of the community members that might be willing to lead, initiate such an effort. We've had that before. I'm fairly convinced that that's a necessity, that we have that. And I also think, Mr. McInnes, and it's not really fair to put you on the spot, but I think there might be some new legislation that impacts a half-cent sales tax, or how that can be done and when. Are you prepared to speak to that, those new?
Well, only to confirm that you're right, that the legislature has revised some of the procedural requirements for that. Such a sales is different than when we were preparing even 2 years ago to go forward. And I think now they have required that it has to be in a general election.
No mail-outs, no special?
That's probably one of the biggest changes, is that they've now required, because that was always a big conversation for agencies before. When do we do the election? What kind of election is it? And they've pretty much put that to rest.
Well, and also, I think it's safe to say that this next go-around, they tried it this go-around to get a supermajority on that. So I've heard that's not a dead issue moving into the next legislature. But it also shows that our legislators believe that a general election is the best time to put something out there like that. So, and I think that's, in a case like this, that's when the majority of the voters are out there. So, you know.
And I think last time we did this successfully, and I believe we were both principals at the time, that every school principal had the opportunity to submit 3 to 5 of their major needs. And so then out of that, the community helped select, and there was not a single school community that didn't get something resolved or dedicated to them, to their community. So I think that's a worthwhile initiative to keep in mind.
And I remember 2 such initiatives, one that was successful.
I do too. That's why I said the successful one.
All right, and then, but the second one, and I've spoken to this before, we attempted, and we only carried 6 of 52 precincts. That's how badly we lost it. And frankly, we haven't recovered since. We haven't tried one since, and I believe that was in 2010. And that's why I concur with Mr. Chambers that this is not one that we want to go forward with if we're not sure that this is what the voters would be willing to accept, because we've had to wait 9 years.
And it does need to be, I believe, a community-driven event and not driven by us.
Dr. Kelly, you're exactly right. That's why that one succeeded. But we have a new component now, which is a security need that everybody understands and everybody supports. So we do a combination of those two, and I believe the voters will support us.
And I agree with that getting the community, I mean, that's what got the county, was having like the Chamber of Commerce behind it, all those groups get behind it to support it, so.
Okay. Anything else, colleagues? Put you on the spot, didn't mean to do that, but hey, we're talking about capital outlay dollars. So
No, I appreciate it.
It's appropriate.
And I kind of want to ask a question back, because like I said, we are having some of these discussions internally right now. So I do appreciate you actually asking that question. And I guess I'd even ask the question back, is there support from the board in terms of us continuing these discussions to eventually bring to you an organized and well thought out plan?
My thoughts are, as long as we've got community leadership in such a plan.
And that would be mine too.
Yeah, and along those lines, I would ask our attorney to give us some guidance on the kinds of roles that we can play in such an effort, because I think there's some caveats there about what we can and can't do. Okay? All right. Okay, so yes.
And I would say, I assure you, it would be community-led.
Initiated, exactly.
Yes.
That's the only way it's going to succeed.
Well, I think item 4.1 is going to be a parent that will probably speak on why we should pursue this, so.
Yeah.
All right, colleagues, anything else? Okay, you good, Ms. Scallon?
Yes, sir.
Mr. Chambers?
Yes, sir.
Mr. Attorney?
Yes, sir.
All right, we're adjourned.
Good job, sir.
Thank you.